going to other private schools. So when you're making your decision, you're now pushing people out of the public school system who may have wanted to stay in a public school system. So I think you also have to look at that as well. I think the public school system offers an awful lot for our children. We should support it. And as a school board, I think that you should think about that as well. Obviously, I also would like you to go back to the other policy as we've had it in the past, and hopefully you'll do that at the next board meeting. My question to Attorney Graham is, as far as qualifying a hardship, isn't something as simple as not offering a course available to a student considered an educational hardship?
No, it's not by the state of New Hampshire. So a manifest educational hardship by the decisions that have been reached by the...
And we're using educational hardship
That's
right
correct.
now, not manifest hardship.
You know, if you're using a different terminology, it's up to what the board determines as the terminology. I think that discussion has been fully joined, and the board has the ability to decide what its criteria are. But I thought you asked a question about manifest educational hardship.
No, educational hardship.
Okay. No. Manifest educational hardship, no. Educational hardship, I have no idea. It depends on what the board defines it as.
Okay, thank you.
Jim, and then Todd.
I'm one of these old school board members, and I hate to be accused of not doing what's best for the kids, because my family's been doing it for over 60 years. So please, in all due respect, school board members need to treat us fairly. We're now public citizens. I was on the school board, and I was assigned the policy decision. And we go back, this decision has been talked about going back about at least 3 years. In April, and February of 8th, 2011, a former school board member who's not here, who chose to leave early, stated his hesitation, indicating there is no strong rule for approval, which is what exactly everyone is saying there. So you're absolutely right. People kept asking, well, what's case by case? If we go back to the old case by case, that does not mean that it was working. It was working because everyone was approved. If we had decided back then, using case by case, which is in the definition, which all I can say is what I was using, case by case, separate and distinct from others of the same kind. Well, if that's the case, that means the same criteria regarding hardship. There was a concern regarding what this case by case is. So we looked at it, and instructed by the school board on the policy committee, went back and looked. We needed to know what a definition of case by case is. So we applied and we presented the hardship criteria. If there is a flaw in the policy, then it needs to be corrected. Perhaps a flaw in the hardship and the policy is it does not specifically mention educational hardship. So maybe that's the flaw that needs to be added. Again, I don't know. But all we can do is, we have a contract, and I'm doing what's best for Hooksett. And people who say I was doing best for Manchester, shame on them. But that's another story. I'm very pleased for my service, and I'm very happy we have 2 new school board members. Wish I was one of them, but unfortunately that's what we decided. So I'm going to wish them the best of luck. As I hope they were demanding of us, I'm going to demand the same thing. This is not an easy situation. If in 2001, Hooksett School District had decided to build a co-op, there would be no case by case. We would have to apply the standard of an educational hardship because Hooksett was not meeting the requirements of our students. Then it would be up to the superintendent under JEC, whatever that policy is, for him to decide. So unfortunately, the contract is the contract, and we have to follow case by case, distinct and separate from all others. What is that criteria? I wish we could actually come up with a, as Mrs., I forgot what Mrs., whoever, the former teacher, who I was a former teacher, a rubrics on what meets this requirement. Well, unfortunately, if we had that possibility, then all this problem would be resolved, and we wouldn't have to be deciding. So all we can do is make sure that we provide all our students with the opportunities. We can't suffer one student over someone else's benefit, because that's not really fair. So how are we going to solve that problem? I had sound reasons when I was on the school board. Hopefully my fellow school board members had sound. So it's now up to them. If we can come up with an answer that if you meet A, B, and C requirement, then by all means you can go to any school you want. But I don't think that's as easy as said as done. So all I can do is hope that you do the best. And again, it's all case by case. And what's the case by case is? Maybe as a result of this forum, Manchester will come and say, hey, case by case isn't going wherever you want. So let's be careful what we say here, because Manchester may come and say, hey, Hooksett, let's be careful what you're doing, because we expect all your students. So all I can do is say I wish you the best. I know you'll all make the best decisions based on what you think is, and that's all I can ask for. So I hope you've solved this problem, because there's a lot of K through 8 kids that we need to concentrate on just as well. So that's all I can say. Thank you very much.
I think he was directing it to me.
Oh, I didn't think it was directed at you, but if you'd like to respond.
I would.
I was not directing it to anyone. It was a general statement. If he feels it was directed
He's
to
talking about new board members, so it's either me or Mike. I'd like to answer.
Okay, you can answer, but I really do not want to get into.
No, I'm not going to. No, I want to clarify something.
Okay.
I had a discussion with the attorney about case by case. And Mr. Graham explained to me, first of all, that he did not suggest hardship be put into the policy. That's not his role to suggest policy. We talked about a couple of scenarios, and he said his legal advice, and he can correct me if I misquote him, but that we could go with the old policy, but there should be a reason given by the parents. So we talked about a couple of those reasons that he would think passed muster. I said, how about if the other school offers a class that that school doesn't? He said he thought that would be acceptable. I said, what about if a school has block scheduling and the other one doesn't? His opinion was that might not be acceptable. But ultimately, anything is acceptable unless Manchester challenges us. Because it's our school board's decision of what case by case means, unless we are challenged from Manchester through the arbitration process that's set up with the contract. Thus far, we have not been challenged. And if we are going to say that we were doing this pro forma and without any reason, I would think adding one reason would give us a better standing than we've even had for the last 8 years where we haven't been challenged. Just wanted to clarify that. Hardship is not required by the contract.
I'm going to go to Todd next, and I have 1, 2. Are there other people who have not had a chance to speak yet who would like to ask a question or come up and make a comment? Okay. So I have, what? Okay, so let's do Todd first, because I said you were after Jim. So Todd, 2, 3, 4. You're 4, okay? Great. Todd?
Todd Lazat. The attorney brought up 194-22, and I was remembering that 194-27 indicated that the tuition liability was the only liability in regards to the amount of tuition was based on the sending district's or its high school. I'm figuring its as a possessive pronoun. That would indicate that, and because that deals with contracts, that would mean that if we sent somebody to a different district, a public school district, that we would, the only liability we'd have would be the amount of tuition which we pay of the high school of record in Manchester. And I was just worried if that's not the case. I see Dr. Littlefield nodding his head, is maybe you can clarify 194-27. The other question that I had was once again back in terms of the agreement and the fact that with the policy, I'm guessing the council council reviewed the policy, and what's come up, and I was interested in this decision about subjective decision making. I know there's been a lot of precedent in regards to Title VII discrimination in regards to hiring practices. I guess the question is, in there's a lot of language that talks about subjective decision making, which is not based on any objective criteria, being that it's hard to separate out discrimination, not because it's an overt thing, it's just that decisions then become based on personal experience or personal biases that are subconscious or unconscious, I should say. And that, and the question would be, in this case, do you approve the policy the way it sits? And do you think that we could be subject to any liability based on the fact that we've made decisions that were not based on objective criteria? Thank you.
Does anyone wish to address that now, or?
Well, I'll address the issue concerning 194.27. 194.27 obligates the district when it does not maintain a high school and has not entered a contract with the school which is approved by the State Department of Education to send students to pay the tuition at whatever school accepts those students. And the tuition is determined by the State Department of Education at the receiving school. So it's not the sending school district's tuition, it's the receiving school district's tuition rate that's approved by the State Department of Education. Excuse me, I'm sorry, I'm having a contact attack here. So that's the answer to that question.
Moderator?
I'm not moderator, but yes.
Just a quick rebuttal, because I was reading the statute. It says, except under contract as provided by RSA 194.22.
Right.
Right? Which would indicate the contract would have a bearing on it, right?
No, that means that the two districts, sending and receiving district, can enter into an agreement if they choose to. So,
Right.
if the receiving district, in a situation where the district doesn't obtain a school, that means that a district can enter into an agreement that's not approved by the State Department of Education. Say a district wants 10 seats at school district A. Many districts have done this for years. Deerfield did it for a long time. You know, they have 10 seats at Oyster River, 10 seats at Co-Brown, 10 seats at Concord, 10 seats at Pembroke, and to take care of their kids. And they'd enter agreements that weren't approved by the State Department of Education. And kids could go wherever they wanted, but there were a certain number of seats, and they'd have lotteries for kids to be able to go to those seats. And that's what it's talking about. Those 194.22 contracts don't have to be approved by the State Department of Education. If they are, then it's a contract that's deemed to be maintained by the district. Is that clear?
Yes.
Two, yes.
Hi, my name's Tom Cody, and is there any example of hardship that the board can give that you would approve? That you've been, over the past year, you've been making decisions on hardship, and they haven't met that degree that you need. Is there anything that you can give an example that would be acceptable? And
That's actually what I was going to suggest.
Okay, go ahead.
I've actually been asked that question before, and based on, again, the ED 320, I was finding it very difficult to put an example together, but if I can defer to our attorney. Our attorney is willing to answer that one.
If you're willing to answer it, that's fine. If you want to comment on it afterwards, you can.
Just quickly, an example, and it's a very difficult standard to meet. There's just no question about it.
one answer doesn't define everything, so there's a lot of different things that can come into play. But
correct. Yeah, there are a lot of, but there is no question that it's a very difficult standard to meet, and so manifest educational hardship, in order to meet that standard, examples would include, and there have been these situations where, and I relayed this to the superintendent recently, about a situation in another district where a young student was involved in an affair with an older individual who was